I feel very honored today, guys, to interview my next guest. His name is James Rapoza Lee. His girlfriend is was my former geometry student and former life coach as well. James is a 2012 Kamehameha Schools graduate. He spent his high school years golfing and competing in speech and debate. And he also coached speech and debate at Cedar High School in Utah. And when I saw this part of his resume, he did the same thing that my dad did, apprenticeship program at Pearl Harbor as a machinist, which he currently does today. And also his passion being ultimate frisbee. I love that you're the captain of your adult mixed club team. Love the name Birds of Paradise. In 2021, the accomplishment of the coaching's life coach program, I'm sure was instrumental in, well, I believe this is why I wanted to interview. I thought, wow, with such a diverse background, residing in San Diego, doing, I mean, it sounds like you're passionate about your hobbies, passionate about your profession. But as a life coach, what do you think was or is a lesson that you feel parents today can benefit from? Because it's such a stressful journey, parenting. And so I would love to hear your perspective and how your mom or your elders taught you how to deal with the pressures of growing up.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. Excited to be here. And yeah, I definitely hear a lot of what you're saying reflected in like what I'm seeing kind of just generally. Obviously my brother and my sister are still my sister's 18, my brother's 16, so they're still, teenagers basically. And watching them grow up and, kind of how things have gotten in the world, it's, there is a lot of stress I feel like going around, and there's a lot of like expectation, and there's a lot of like specialization, expectation, that kind of thing. And as far as my perspective, just growing up, I grew up on Oahu. My mom was kind of more or less a single mom. But the lessons that I probably got from my mom were the things that pulled me through, pretty stressful times, I would say. I think the biggest thing is uh, my mom was very easygoing in that she always helped me to understand that like things will work out one way or another, right? Things will work out, and then it's how you respond to that. And more so like, especially in today's age, I feel like with everything, so you like feel the pressure to be specialized and feel the pressure to like, I have to pick something from a young age to be good at. You got, I always see this stuff on Instagram, which is great, of kids playing baseball, very skilled from like a young age, playing football, and like they're out here doing drills every night, and like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's great if that's what you want. Um, but I feel like there is a lot of pressure from parents, and I don't think it's not, intentionally like not loving, because it is, right? It's, I want my kid to succeed. I want them to have the best future. Um, but I think the greatest gift you could probably give your child is the gift of just like agency, the gift of having choice, and the gift of being able to like, just try different things. And, we I feel like in this day and age, we get a little like uptight with like, okay, they got to get into college, and like colleges look for more and more and more and more, right? To
Mm-hmm.
right get into good colleges. And I think the thing as an adult that I've learned is like, there are a lot of paths to life. Um, and whatever way your path takes you, it will probably work out. Um, I have so many different friends who've done so many different things, and none of the paths were perfect. Whether you became a doctor, or I have friends that are lawyers now. I have friends that have gone to Harvard that have done that path, and I have friends that, out of high school went to the apprenticeship, and out of high school went to the military. And I think the thing that I've known for a long time, and I think the thing that always plays out in life is that things will eventually work out. Um, and I think for the journey of life, like you have to take everything with a lot of perspective. And I think giving your kids perspective is more important than giving them a leg up in the world. because if they can have perspective at any different point in their life to give them either the peace of mind or the mental awareness or um, yeah, just the knowing that like we're gonna be okay. The only thing we need to do now is figure it out. Um, and that like it doesn't have to go the way you think it's gonna go because it never does. If we're
It
being
never does. So,
it yeah.
what about when you approach problems, or can you share like what your mom's philosophy was? Like, if you
Hmm.
had to fix it, would she feel like, oh, I need to guide James to make sure that he's doing the right thing, or what was her message to you?
Yeah, I think for me, her approach growing up was she never tried to interfere past making sure I was safe. Um, she would basically, if I had a problem, she never felt like she needed to intervene. She would always ask me what I would like to do about it, which I think was important because she never like pushed me to like, oh, you need to talk to this person and this person and this person, or like I'm gonna go talk to this person, this person, this person, make sure this gets fixed, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. I think there is a big, and I get it because I have a little sister and little brother. Like there is this need to kind of like make sure that nobody either takes advantage of them or like gets in their way or stops them from being who they are or as great as they could be. Um, and I think maybe a lot of parents internalize the journey of their child as their own sometimes, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a little unfair, right? And I think the thing my mom was really good about is letting me have my journey, as rocky and as hard as it must have been for her sometimes, because obviously stuff
Witnessing, yeah,
doesn't go
witnessing the
well.
pain.
Yeah, and the thing that kids need, I think, is for you to be there and let them know it's gonna be okay. But also like giving them agency, so giving them uh, the ability to respond, right? Like I feel like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes something happens to a child, and I don't I don't necessarily think that like growing up we don't have the experience to like respond quickly. And so
Mm-hmm.
like when we don't respond to something, I feel like sometimes parents will step in, be like, this is what you should do. And like sometimes that's good, but sometimes that's unsolicited advice, you know?
Probably most of the
Some
time.
yeah,
As
and
a
and
parent, I think
sometimes
I stepped in too much.
yeah, and sometimes like you just need to give them the opportunity to respond and just be there to catch them if they fall. Like for me, that was a lot of what happened is my mom would ask me like, "Do you want to keep doing this or do you not?" Because I just need you to choose so that I know how to support you, right? And kids aren't gonna know sometimes, and like that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the kids are gonna be like, "Oh, like I don't know," And my mom was just like, "Okay, well, just take some time to think about it." And it's like we don't need to know right away. Like life moves fast, especially I think when you have kids. I don't have kids, but like you know,
Well, like your siblings, though, do you think that you practice that same philosophy where, you're so tempted to prevent them from failing or pain? Do you practice that
I
same approach?
mm, I feel like I get a little bit of that from my mom, where I'm like, "Oh, what do you want to do?" That's if you whatever you need for you to get to where you want to go is fine. So like with my little sister, she was great in band. She was wonderful, did solos the whole 9 yards. We always offered to her like, hey, like, you can go out for drum major, or you're talented enough to lead. But she never really wanted that. And like that's okay. If that was your lane and you wanted to do that and you had a good time, that worked out. And then when it came time for college applications, when I did my college applications, it was all in my own free will. So my mom told me, look, I don't know how to do college applications, but whatever you need signed, I will sign it. If you don't want to go to college, fine, we'll figure something out. You can go to work, you can do whatever you want to do. And so like when I did my college applications literally on my own, I filled out my mom's FAFSA. She gave me her
Wow.
tax forms and was like, okay, here you go, like figure it out. I think the thing that my mom gave me that she didn't realize she gave me is that like she's trying to figure it out also. And I think we don't give that to our kids sometimes. It's like we don't give them like, hey, we're all adults, and even though we're trying to figure it out too. So when I got to be an
Mm-hmm.
adult, it wasn't that big of a surprise that like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but like also everyone else doesn't know what they're doing. So I think giving that gift of like uh almost like some kind of like equity, like between you, like just because they're an adult and they're a parent doesn't mean that they don't feel the same things that you do. And I feel like sometimes I've seen this in a lot of different parents, and I'm as a kid I was very observant of other people's parents. I
Hmm.
know some of my friends' parents like liked to give the front of like I have it all together, like
Yes.
I know the answers, and like that's fine, but like I think we need to give parents as much grace as we give kids, because
Mm.
parenting is hard, right? Like it's so many new emotions, right? Because you never know. A lot of people say, right, like you don't know love until you have a child, right? There's a lot of new emotions. There's a lot of like new life experiences. There's a lot of new decisions you never thought you were gonna make. Dealing with their friends' parents. It's all new relationships that you're running into,
Hmm.
uh, and so like and also your child is experiencing life for the first time, so everything is new to them, so
Right.
everyone's doing new things. Like, why do we all feel like we have to have it figured out, you know I think that's the thing that I'm super grateful for. And now that some of my friends are having kids, and some of them are like, oh yeah, I don't know what's going on. I'm like, yeah, you're supposed to not know what's going on.
Yes, yeah,
This
I
is
love
new.
that. You're not supposed to know because I think, a lot of moms that I work with, you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And then I think, well, I don't know what I'm doing too.
Mhm.
What? And they just think that it's an unrealistic expectation because, like you said, it depends on current emotions, circumstances, challenges, and like you mentioned, everyone operates differently. So how would you even know?
Yeah, I really enjoyed when I grew up watching, because my mom and some of her best friends from high school all had kids around the same time. So there was a few of us that were the same age, and it was so fun watching like just the different parenting styles kind of growing. I was also very observant as a child, which was probably just me, just the way I absorbed the
Thing.
world when I was young. Um, but yeah, growing up, it was like to me, like when I saw other people getting parented, I was like, okay, that seems right, and that seems right, and that seems like it's working, and that seems like it's working. So, I know there's all these like, you'll see on Instagram or whatever, like, oh, these are the things, right? That's
Yeah,
always
yes.
the
The
hook, right?
one
Is like,
thing that you need to do,
yeah.
right? And then
And like
there's an opposing thing.
I so dislike that in the world, because I feel like that's the same thing of like, it's the same thing that we do to kids, right? When they start getting to that age where it's like you gotta do this one thing, or you gotta do this one thing. And I think as humans, we trap ourselves almost into like, okay, like, you have to, there's a way this has to go, right? And growing up, I watched a lot of movies. You watch movies and you're like, oh, things should go this way, things should go this way, right? We're just, as creatures, in with the way our brains work, that's how we experience it. But I think having perspective as to like how crazy it is, what's happening to us, like I don't think we acknowledge that
Right.
enough. It's like how crazy life is,
Yeah.
right? Like, we're all on a rock in space, figuring it out, trying to survive, also manage relationships, also find fulfillment, also procreate, also like parent the kids that we've not procreated. Like, this is all really intense, insane things. Like, we can't
Yeah. And then
bypass
balancing
the
it all,
and
following the
then trying to
rules, and then
trying
you
to
don't
balance it
know,
all.
yeah, the rules change or you don't. I just read somewhere and says, you know what, rules are like don't follow them. And people are like,
Yeah.
"What? Don't follow them?" But that's what you're saying, that there's
Hmm.
no one way.
Hmm. Yeah, I've seen. I mean, I grew up watching so many different people, and it's always interesting, right? The way different ways people are raised,
Hmm.
and I think if you realize, like, if we just stop to take a look around, like all of our friends, right? I would say like probably most of the people in your friends group were parented differently,
Yes.
right? We all have stories about our parents, right? And they're all different, but yet we're all here and we're all fine,
Hmm.
And I think we never stop to remember that, like you said, like rules are made, but like who are they made by? They're made by us, right? We've always tend to forget that like we made it, and like I said, we like trap ourselves with our own rules.
Yeah.
But like we're the only ones that can remove the trap and be like, however you want to parent is however you want to parent. you love your child. We all know that. So, whatever you need to do to feel like you're loving on your child is fine. If whatever other people say is really inconsequential, in my opinion, you know, um, they're not the one raising your child. They're not the one with your child
Mm-hmm.
most of the time. So, I mean,
Wise words. Yeah, well, because then you feel incompetent. When you read all of
mm,
these, I was thinking, do I need more like parent certification, coaching things? And then my friend said, Karen,
mm,
you lived it, right? I have a 26-year-old, a 20-year-old, but I'm questioning whether I'm
mm,
following. And like you said, I recently I'm like, wait a minute. Then it'll never end. The certification, the classes, because like you said, we're all different. So who's to say, one person's advice is better than.
well, one thing me and Melinda talk about a lot is, there's all this talk about childhood trauma, and now
Yes, healing the inner child. Yeah.
I feel like now parents are like afraid to parent because they're
Yes.
like, am I gonna traumatize my
Yeah.
child? I mean, first and foremost, no matter what, this is a brand new human. You're going to traumatize them because you're around them a lot. It's it's bound
Well,
to
someone just
happen.
told me that. Yeah, she was from a very abusive upbringing. She said, you know what? No matter how perfect you think you're doing, every child is going to
Mm-hmm.
be messed up in their own way. We cannot prevent. I think we
Mm-hmm.
try this unrealistic, like I'm going to do this the perfect way, and then
Mm-hmm.
each time you mess up, you do believe that you're
Mm-hmm.
ruining your child, and then it's guilt, then it's
Mm-hmm.
shame. And so I love
Yeah.
how you just mentioned that. So what is your take
Yeah.
on that? It sounds like
I think you need to give your child the gift of being you around them.
ooh.
I think that's the thing that my mom gave me is she never like, not that she didn't sugarcoat anything or like, but she was never like, was totally raw with me. But
Mhm.
there was this good place that I think she found where she was herself. So even when I was young, this is kind of a funny story, but she had me when she was 25. So, my dad, she took me away from my dad because, he had drug abuse issues, and I'm very grateful for that. Um, and, when she would go out, she was still young, so she would go out, to the clubs, or, she'd have a stressful day at work and she want to go out. She's leaving my grandparents. She never like didn't tell me she wasn't going out with her friends. And like, as she got a little older, we'd go hang out with my uncles and my aunties, people that she grew up like I'm doing right now. Like, we'll go partying, clubbing, whatever it is. And it was never like they stopped being themselves. I always felt like it was okay, so when I got older and like, you know, I heard swear words and drinking and all this kind of stuff, and it was, and even my stepdad. This is another interesting story. Um, Growing up, my stepdad. I mean, in Hawaii, everybody loves to gamble, and so he played cards, and my mom would have to work or something, and the thing that always ended up happening is I would just go along, and I was pretty like obedient, and
Mm.
so I would just go, with him. I would sit behind him, watch him play cards, and some of the adults were kind of like, oh, like should he be not here or whatever, and usually they were like, no, like he's fine, whatever, like.
How old are you? Can I ask how old you were?
I was maybe when I first started going,
Mm-hmm.
maybe like 10. And then, and they'd smoke cigars and drink and all this kind of stuff. And by the time I was 12, I had learned how to play poker, and I was playing poker with adults. And
Wow.
and I understood that I was a child. Like I really did understand that. But I would win sometimes. Like I remember like I would win money, but like I didn't really understand how much money I had won. And so, my stepdad would pocket it and buy me a couple video games, but like I don't think it balanced out, but whatever. He took care of me, right? And so there's no repaying that. But yeah, uh it's so interesting because I always was brought with my parents to situations that probably a lot of other parents would be like, oh no, you could never do that. I remember very vividly, my parents loved like comedy and stuff like that. And I remember when the movie Jackass came out, and
Mm.
they were like, "Oh, that looks so good, whatever, whatever." And I never really had a sitter. Like growing up, I never really had, I would just go. And so I was like 11 or 12 when it came out, and my mom brought me, and she said, we want to see this movie, we're going to see this movie, but what I need you to know is that like you shouldn't be doing any of this, like this is dangerous. But these guys do it because they are making money, but like they're doing it for entertainment purposes, whatever. They had real conversations with me, I think, is the thing. Is they wouldn't be afraid to talk to me like I was an adult, like I was another human.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes if you try to protect your kids, I think it's almost worse.
Yeah.
Because if you try to protect them, then the first time that they're introduced to something is when you're not there.
Yeah.
Right. And so like I would be around them, they would drink with their friends and that kind of stuff. And it was fine. They took care of me. But like when I got out into the world and like, I would drink for the first time or whatever, like it wasn't new to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I also knew that like they weren't there anymore. So now it's on me. So it's almost like I got prepared for it by being there. And there's a lot of other instances where like I was in it with my parents. Another probably more traumatizing story is when my mom's parents got divorced. I was 14, 13, 14. So in high school, going through high school things at the same time. And my grandma was very persistent on like everyone in the family knows what we're doing because we lived, with my grandparents, and they're like, if you live in this house, you know what's going on, which was
Mm-hmm.
cool, transparency. But we'd have these family meetings, and like they would talk about their problems and their finances in front of me, which looking back on it was probably pretty traumatic,
Mm-hmm.
right? Watching It's interesting watching your parent go through a divorce
Oh yeah.
because you realize how human they are, like just the crying and the pain. But it almost helped me feel like they are just another human.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't need to be afraid of them. I don't need to, you know, I don't need to be afraid of them, and I don't need to be afraid of life, because this is how it is for everyone. And if this is how it is for everyone, I know that like later down the road, if it gets hard, this is how it is. This is how it's supposed to be, as opposed to like putting on the front of like, no, everything's fine. We're all good. Everything's perfect. That's more stressful, and I feel like almost more traumatic
When
to.
isn't that social media? That's what they're saying. The
Hmm.
mental health of young kids are, you need to have a
Yeah.
filter. You need to look like what
Hmm.
this unrealistic perfection, right? So you
Yeah.
actually had that gift of
Yeah.
witnessing and not even judging. It's almost like this is,
Yeah.
I love how you said that, like this is the way it's supposed to be. So you don't aim for perfection,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's stressful.
Social media is interesting because I feel like for my kind of era of kids, and probably for your kids because they're probably around the same age, where we
Yeah.
went from no technology to all
To
the
nature.
technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have a pretty decent perspective of like, okay,
Well,
like
because you
we
had
knew
life
what
before. Yeah. You
we
had
had
life
life before
before.
and we had life after the internet. So like we still have that perspective, I think. And I think it's
Hmm.
important for our generation to like, and I think that's why our generation is pushing the hardest for like mental health. And a lot of us realize the changes that we've gone through, and we're doing the healing work, I feel like.
Hmm.
But it's important for us because the next generation is the one that's not going to have that perspective, right? Of
Well,
like
because ever since they're, I mean, you see these 2-year-olds, they're looking at the phone,
on
they have their own
phones.
iPad. They're, I
Hmm.
mean, it's just, and they're manipulating, I mean, they know how to do it, and they're like 3 years old or even younger, right?
Yeah, and I think that that's something that like you gotta let you gotta let your kids see kind of the ugly sometimes.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then they're not gonna think that like bad things happen or things don't go your way, or that kind of thing. And also like just giving them the realness of life. I think sometimes it makes however many likes you get on Instagram really like fade away. you know
Mm.
like that's right, that's the validation that they seek and all this kind of stuff. But like I feel like the realness of life really like sobers you up a little bit.
Wow, that's a good quote right there. The
Yeah.
realness of life.
Yeah, because you can be on the internet, you can be on Twitter, say whatever you want to say, but once you step outside, like it's real. That's
Yeah.
when it becomes real. And I think allowing your kids to like respond to the realness of life, of like, let them make mistakes, let them change their mind, let them, be bad at something, let them, you know just figure it out for themselves. Because if they never figure it out for themselves and they're just like, you got to do it this way, then what happens when it doesn't go that way? Right? Like,
That's
that's hard.
traumatizing. Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's why I think
exactly.
6-year-olds are like, oh my gosh, I got it wrong. And they're having a meltdown and it's
Hmm.
first grade homework, but they're taught
Hmm.
to correct, to prevent mistakes, right?
Yeah. And yeah, I've always, child development to me is really interesting because, there's always like, just these benchmarks, right? That you got to
Mm,
hit by a certain age. Um, I feel like, I get it, right? I get why we do that. A big education system bringing people up at the same age together. It's hard to individualize sometimes. And I think for parents, I think it's important to know to not judge your kid against other kids. Because like think about how crazy the human brain is. Like we still don't understand it enough to like be like, okay, you should know this by now, right? The For your child, I think, to have a healthy childhood, they need to be allowed to be them, which means they need to be allowed to go at their speed sometimes, whether you like it or not. That's the big thing, is whether you like it or not. Because I think a lot of parents, and it's a normal emotion to have,
hmm
right? It's the kind of like, I want my child to
To
be
meet the
excelling and be the
standards, to,
one.
yeah.
But I don't know if you've met some of the most fun people in the world, but they're usually not those people. you know
That's true.
um some of my favorite friends, are people who, they weren't the best at anything really, but that's what makes them fun, is like they failed, and you know they've coped with failing. And for me, that's what comedy is. I'm a huge fan of comedy, and like how it, you know personalizes and deconstructs our failures, right? They say that the only difference between a dramatic script and a comedy script is the tone. It
Mm.
could be the same content, and one could be really sad and one could be really funny. That's what I learned in speech and debate, is that's the only difference. And I think, um, for that's just the way I cope. But like, giving people the opportunity to, like, whatever way that they need to process something, let them process it that way. Because at the end of the day, especially if you're a parent, like, I think it can go one of a couple ways, right? But like mostly it's like, you can allow your child to process it at their speed and whatever it is, or you don't, and then they learn how to judge the way they react to things,
Oh, that
right?
is true.
It's
And then
either
you
not
only have a
fast
perspective.
enough,
Yes.
not good enough, um, not self-destructive enough. The thing about dating Melinda that I found interesting is the different ways, that we experienced life growing up. Um, she always has a lot of shame and guilt. Even today, for her birthday, I gave her some money and told her, go on a shopping spree, treat yourself, because I know that she has money scarcity issues. And so I'm like, you need to spend, like, I could buy this for you. I really could. I could go and get you, and you'd be very grateful. But I need you to go and spend this money on yourself, because I know it would mean more for you. And
Wow.
she's just so, guilt, shame comes up, all that kind of stuff, and like she's
Well,
puts it
because
at a
you're taught,
distance.
right? Yeah, you're taught. I need to save, even if it's not. And if
Hmm.
those issues are, wow. So you are. I mean, that's a life changing opportunity. That is a
Yeah,
treasured birthday gift. It's
yeah.
not just a shopping spree, but what it actually does.
Because like it could, they say sometimes you get gifts for other people for you, which I get, right? It feels good to give other people gifts, especially good gifts. And so I struggled with that, thinking about a gift for her, but I thought about what would be more meaningful, and that's what I fell on. And I think that falls into my greater philosophy of like, um, you got to let people. Oh, this is the thing. This is the thing. Growing up, my mom really gave this to me, and it was about friends or something, and it was like, you got to let people figure it out for themselves. And this had to do with like, a friendship that had kind of fallen apart. And it's like you can tell someone, hey, like you should do this,
Mhm,
right?
mhm, mhm,
You
mhm.
shouldn't be with that person, or you should do this and not that. But it means more if it comes from them, right?
Yes.
And from a life coaching perspective, that's really what it is, right? It's
Yes.
what you build is more important, right? Because you don't pay a life coach to build something for you. Well, maybe some people do, but in my opinion, good coaches, you don't pay them to build something for you. You hire them because they will give you the space and kind of like lay a flat foundation for you to build whatever it is you want. And I think that's more or less going to be my parenting philosophy, is just keep the ground flat. You don't have to build a garden for them. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to do the floorboards or paint the walls or whatever it is. That's not your job. Your job is just to keep the foundation flat and let them do with whatever they want to do with it. And if you don't like what they do with it, that's okay. You're allowed to disagree with your child, but I think it's a little overbearing to be like, that's not how it should be, instead of, oh, I don't think I agree with that. But you are entitled to live your life that way, as much as I disagree with it, which I think there's a lot of things going around in the world with just absolutism and
Yes.
that kind of stuff. And I don't agree with it. Um, you gotta let people, like I said, like you gotta let them figure it out for themselves, because they're either gonna do it their way and enjoy the fact that you allow them and support them and do that,
Mhm, mhm.
or they're gonna do it their way and then just be mad at you for not liking the way they did it,
Well, that's what
right?
causes a lot of friendships to end because they don't believe that, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, I told you, you should have broken up with that person, or, you
Mm,
should, like this mask versus not mask ended friendships. I mean, whether it's
mm-hmm.
religious or political or just, it's sad because, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, you're not allowing others to do life
Yeah.
their way. I mean,
It,
I
it,
can't put it any, I mean,
I
that
have a
is,
I have a lot of friends who are like, if you tell them not to do something, and I think
they'll
I'm a
do it.
little bit this way too. Yeah, exactly. Like it's human nature. Like, if you tell me not to touch the hot stove, I'm gonna be like,
Exactly.
well, what if I do? Like,
Well, then
and
the
I,
curiosity is there. That's why they always
mm-hmm,
tell parents, don't forbid your child to, like, you better not go out with that girl or that guy
mm-hmm.
because you're just like, oh, and then that
Oh,
curiosity.
that's actually really funny, because I did date someone that my mom, uh, not that she like really disliked, but just like, was kind of like not really about it. And I did not know the whole time. I dated this girl for 2 years, and my mom was like, yeah, I didn't, after the fact, she's like, yeah, I didn't really like her. That, wasn't my favorite. And I was like, why didn't you say anything? Like, why didn't you tell me? And she's like, because I could have, but you had to figure it out on your own. Like, I could have said that and you would have been like, oh, you're crazy, whatever. And I didn't want you to
Yeah,
think I was
that's true.
crazy,
That's true.
but she's like, I trusted you to figure it out. You figured it out. So, you know, that's the gift I think my mom continues to give me, is yeah, she lets me figure it out. Like, you know, when they get older, and I think by the time you're 14, 15, 16, like in high school, like you have the ability to figure it out. You really do. I think most people do. Um, and you got to let them exercise it, because
Regardless of their failures, right? Because I think that's
yeah.
what stops parents from allowing that. Their
Mm,
fear of negative consequences, their fear
mm.
of, because sometimes that's what gets them kicked out of school, or that's what, yeah, I mean, leads to all kinds of stuff.
Oh
But
yeah.
like right? But
I've at going to Kamehameha, people who get kicked out,
yeah,
people who leave, and guess what? They're fine. They go to college just like the rest of
they
us.
are, yes.
They
And when you look back, because I remember
mm-hmm.
there was someone, yeah, from my daughter's class, and they think, oh my gosh, one's like a star football player, and you think, oh, it's
Mm.
going to ruin his life, and then everything turns out fine.
Yeah, and then they're fine, and they figure it out. Like the resiliency I think we rob our kids of when
Ooh,
we try to figure it out for them, is like,
oh, I like that.
that's the thing that irritates me. Like sometimes is you rob them of the ability to be resilient when you just, when you take over, when you're the one,
Yeah,
you're living their life for them, like, and I know it's so hard. I know it's so hard, because like you want them to succeed and you want them to do well. Um, but like that's all the games we play in life are like that, right? It's out of our control, and it's hard and it's difficult because we don't have control. We're very right as humans, we're like we want control
Yeah.
over
That's
our
probably the
life.
most challenging part of parenting, right? You need
Yeah,
to release control, and many
exactly.
times,
But if you look at life, right, if you reflect that against life,
yeah,
there are so many things that we can't control that it drives us crazy, right?
yeah.
Somebody could T-bone us in any given intersection, right? Somebody could, steal from us or, right? And like, especially with friendships and dating and like, I have a lot of friends who are like, oh yeah, all these bad things can happen, yada, 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 yada. And I'm like, that opportunity is there no matter what you do. Like life, parenting, dating, going to school, whatever. Like there's an opportunity for things to just go sideways all the time. We live in a perpetual state of like things could go sideways, right?
Hmm, hmm.
Like technically at any point the sun could explode, right? And then it's so if you live your life from that place of fear, you never really move anywhere, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we need to let go of that fear specifically, I think, is with so many moving pieces in the world where, stuff is going to happen, but trusting ourselves to recover or respond or make a decision, right? I think
Hmm.
that thing is the thing we can control the most. And I think we discount it way too much
Oh, yeah.
is the space between something happening to us and just like a reaction. There's a
Hmm,
space
hmm.
for you to make a choice, right? It's a very small window, but if we taught our kids how to master that right there between something happening to them and just, pure human reaction where there's a choice made in the middle of how we want it to go, I feel like we could change a lot of lives and we could save a lot of lives that way,
I was going to
just
say, save, I mean, thousands, if not more lives, because that's what happens in that split second they decide life's not worth it, right?
Yeah, and it's that simple, right? That choice is
Yeah.
just like any other choice we make where it's like, oh, it's time to give up, right? That's obviously like to a deeper level, but like that's that surface thought that we have, right?
Yeah.
Is when things don't go our way and we fail, right? If the first like reaction is to give up, like when it starts going and going and going, eventually you get to that place, which
Yeah.
is dangerous. And so I think that giving our kids the ability to fail and be with the failure and be with the emotions and understand that that's not so scary. And I think that's the thing that maybe a lot of people are afraid of because they haven't confronted it themselves is to fail and then to be with the emotions of failure,
To sit with it. Well,
to
because
sit with it.
it's uncomfortable. It's something that they don't want to be. But if you,
Hmm.
it's almost like I read something. It's like you make friends with failure. You just don't let it, control you. And like you said, you're gonna be okay. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't even know. Yeah, a lot of my students they know. How, I don't think so. I might not be okay. And that's the stronger belief than it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, and I think we don't understand what that does because with I feel like with parenting sometimes it's all about trying to scare them into moving.
Yeah, if
You
you
put
don't
up
do
these.
this, you know what's going to
Yeah,
happen. And I remember
yeah,
I have a friend that, it's gonna like the world might end. You better learn to just fill in the blank. And then that
yeah.
instills fear, which means how
Hmm.
do you trust though if you instill fear?
Hmm. And I don't think it's not unimportant because I think there are certain things because my grandma was very adamant about this. She's like, you need to be scared of certain things.
Oh,
You need
definitely. Yes,
these are
yes.
the things you need to be scared of. And it's like, keep your hands to yourself, don't talk to strangers, those kinds of things,
Right,
right?
right, right. There
But
is,
I
yeah,
think
the
if we
rules.
assign the same fear to things that aren't actually that
Yeah,
serious,
like speaking in front of the class, that is as
yes.
fearful as
Hmm.
right?
And this helping them understand that although they feel like it's life-threatening danger, that in reality it's not. It's okay to feel that way,
Yeah.
but to just put it in their head that like, hey, understand that like that's not actually like life-threatening danger. It's gonna be okay. And like whatever happens, happens. Because I've given thousands of speeches at this point. And I always have that thought in the back of your head of like something going horribly, horribly wrong. Or
During
you
a
say the
speech?
wrong thing. Yeah, all the time. even to this day, the fear of public speaking never goes away, no matter how many times you do it. But you just you've been with the emotions so many times that it's not unfamiliar. Like you said, like you make friends with the emotion. So when you get
Mm-hmm.
to a national level of speaking, you step into a room with some of the best speakers in the country. You're not. It's not that you're not afraid. You're still afraid, but you understand that that's not that fear is almost unfounded.
Mm-hmm.
That fear is not as real as you think it is. That fear is not something that's gonna kill you or stop your life from happening, you know? And I think that's way more important, I think, is to be with your child in failure. Because I feel like for parents, sometimes you also feel like failure when your kids fail.
Well, that's the thing I was going to say, because when your child fails, I used to think, especially as an educator, I failed because as an
Mm-hmm.
educator, I should be able to. And then that's when I thought, wait a minute.
I also can't imagine that fear as for you being an educator. And then like, if your child failed educate, like with education, it's like,
Well, then all my students write, oh, wow, your children must be so lucky to have you. They must be getting good grades. And then you realize, wow, that's pressure, but is that self-induced? Do I really,
mm,
am I going to put that pressure on my
mm,
daughters? And I think in a way I must have because they said, Mom, you would have raised us totally different because I was
mm-hmm,
in it. You know, when you're in
mm-hmm.
it. So I think
Yeah.
that's why you're so way ahead. I can't wait to see you as I'm gonna interview you like when you're a dad. I think
Oh, yeah.
because you're mom and you have so I think it started off just with that deep curiosity as a child that you
Mhm.
questioned everything and you didn't take like, oh, I am going to, fail or just fear failure. And I
Yeah.
think it's all that that is something, if there's one thing, even though you don't believe that, that one thing to tell kids that they're going to be okay no matter what,
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
is so, I mean, just even, when you read that and you think, wow, it's comforting.
Yeah.
Know that, you know what, it's going to be okay through
I
divorce, through death, through like anything, like, you know what?
yeah. I've said that a lot. Especially with Melinda, because she has anxiety, and she's doing what she needs to heal from that. And she'll get her feathers ruffled, and kind of, oh my goodness, like I feel like, oh, like this is the worst. And you got to point out to people that, like, you literally made it this far, right? From all the things you've ever done in your life, to everything that's ever happened to you, like you're still here. So obviously you got through it, not perfectly, but like you got through it. And so this next thing is just like all those other things, you know. And I think I think from what you said, you had that thought in your head of like, oh, my I wonder if my child feels like they need to have good grades because I'm an educator. I think sharing those feelings is important,
Yeah.
because I think my mom did that a lot. Is she was like, "Oh, do you feel this way?" And I think that's like human nature sometimes. Is we want to know that other people feel that way.
Then you're not
You know,
alone. Then you feel
that
like
you're not alone.
normalized. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like I feel like when parents have feelings of like, oh, like I'm feeling these emotions, and like you're experiencing something with your child, I think sharing that is like super
That's
important and
powerful.
supportive.
Well, because then they don't
Yeah.
feel this unrealistic expectation. They don't want to
Mhm.
disappoint you
Yeah.
when
And
you
then
share.
also as a parent, like you are now like kind of inside the head of your child a little bit. You can be
Yeah.
like, oh, like, this is how I'm responding to this. How are you responding to this? And then like they can give whatever free answer. Then like there's really no consequence, right? It's, now you know how they feel. You can share how you feel. And then like, right. That's what we do with friends, right? Is it's like, you know, you went through this. How do you feel about this? And like they share their feelings, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. I feel like that, and I'm not alone anymore. And I think trying to distance yourself, that the gap between, I think, parents and children is always that, uh, trying to be perfect, or the
Being a good role
perfectionism, being
model
a good
or,
role
yeah.
model. And I think being a good role model isn't like I have to be perfect, or like, right, the model dad or whatever. Because if you set up, because you're setting up your own expectation that
Mm-hmm.
is like totally unachievable,
Yes.
right? Is like you're always setting up an expectation for people. And for me, I'm always setting up the expectation with people that I'm human, because that's the only thing I know how to be, is like If I don't know what I'm doing, I'm gonna tell you I don't know what I'm doing. If I feel scared, I'm gonna tell you that I feel scared because like I don't want you to think that like I'm superhuman or anything. Like because once you think that, then you think I can handle more than I can, and that's I don't want to live up to that expectation. You know, um, yeah, and I think parents need to give. It's almost like you're doing right by them by doing right by yourself. Like set up the expectation with them that like I can't be all places at once. I will not solve all your problems. I also don't know what I'm doing, but I'm here to figure it out with you. And I think that's what
Wow.
that's what my mom gave me because even growing up, I was a pretty smart kid and like I could figure stuff out. And my mom would ask me to help her figure stuff out that she did not know. So, whether it was her taxes or something like that, she's
I was
like,
gonna
"Could
say
you?"
FAFSA. Yeah, a lot of parents.
Yeah, I did that all on my own because she told me like, hey, I'm not gonna figure that out. So if you want to do it, sure, tell me what you need, whatever it is. She literally handed me her tax
And
forms.
you
It
just
was like,
trusted yourself to figure out FAFSA.
yeah, and to me, taxes are just another piece of paper that you fill out, you know. But I learned that because and then when I grew up and it was time to do my taxes, I wasn't afraid of it
Mm.
because she's like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, oh, well, there's probably a way to figure it out. So just read the thing and not be scared of it. I know Melinda's really afraid of her taxes. Um,
Yeah, GE is coming up, and so I'm glad that it is a learned behavior. And I think I almost
yeah.
didn't start my own business because I thought, oh no, I got to do taxes, and then you do allow those fears to
Hmm.
control you. But just
Yeah.
hearing what you said, I mean, just knowing
Yeah.
that, hey, a lot of people though, it's like, why do we feel like we need to, you know, know
Yeah.
it
Why do we
all or
why
do
do we feel like we need to know things that like there's no way of us knowing, right? I feel
unrealistic
like
expectations? I think.
yeah, I think kids feel that a lot. Is how was I supposed to know that I was supposed to do that when I've never experienced doing that?
Well, then they get punished for it, right? But then
Exactly.
when you think about it, yeah, they're like, well, I didn't know that I fill in the
Hmm.
blank, and then, well, you should have known better. That's probably said a lot, right? You should have known
Yeah,
better.
I don't like that
Yeah,
saying personally.
because how would, and then if they say, well, how am I supposed to know? Stop talking back, right? It just becomes a
Yeah, we don't have conversations with our kids. I think is the thing.
yes.
Is we parent our kids, but we don't converse with them.
Uh,
Right? Is and maybe I'm using the word parenting wrong, but um, yeah, I feel like we give commands to our kids.
Yeah, well,
We
that's why
give
it's almost like
commandments.
dictating because you just
Hmm.
think you must. And I think maybe we were learned that, we were taught like,
Hmm.
okay, when you're a parent, you
Yeah.
must this, and this. And you just, well, you could just write a parenting book,
Yeah.
because because we need to evolve and change that. What is it? It was an unrealistic belief system that started
Yeah.
from
Yeah, and I think the
behavior.
more developed society became, the more that's something that's like a sociology thing that I'm also fascinated by is just like as societies develop, right? There's a greater expectation of the individual because they now live in the society that's advanced,
Yeah.
right? And I don't think that we understand where we are in history right now. Like we're the most developed society that's ever existed to our knowledge. Um, and I think that we put too much pressure on ourselves because it's so developed.
Yeah.
If I could say that,
Well,
like
expectations are high, right? It's like technology, and then we have all
yeah,
these resources. We should know.
like literally just a century ago, or maybe like even 2 centuries ago, right? The expectation of humans was very much lower
Yeah.
than it is now, right? And so I think we need to have grace for us as a species because this is the most information that's ever been thrown at us at a single time in the history of the world. So don't expect to know it all. Like you see stuff on Instagram you don't know all the time. Yeah, you're not supposed to know all of that stuff
Yeah.
because because we only have so much time in the day and we only have so much mental capacity and like yeah, we're stretching the bounds of humans, but like still, this is the most stressful time I think in human history because this is the most stuff that has ever happened to us and this is the most saturated our brains have ever been. This is the most stuff that's ever happened,
And then you take
right?
this little evolving brain of a
And
six
throw
year
it in
old, a
there.
12-year old, then you think you should know how to. And then they have to figure out what they want to do and choose the college and choose,
Yeah.
the right
Yeah, let them
extracurriculars. Yeah.
let them be kids, because I think if you let them grow at their own pace, I think two things happen. One is they have grace for themselves,
Hmm.
right? And then the second thing is they know how to figure stuff out, which is probably the greatest lesson I got is if you let them go at their own speed, yeah, it might take them a little longer or shorter or whatever it might be. Um, but you've given them the gift of figuring it out.
Hmm.
Therefore, when something else comes up later down the road, they'll be able to figure it out maybe a little faster that time. And then after that, maybe a little faster next time. But if we don't give people the capacity to do that or the space to do that, more importantly, they're going to learn in a space where the consequences are much more dire, right? Is if you don't give them the space to fail and be resilient and all that kind of stuff, then when they go try to do it on their own in the world,
Hmm.
I mean, the consequences do get more dire, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Well, and then they
as a,
fear failure, which might
mhm,
just paralyze them for from even
mhm.
trying, right?
Yeah, and yeah, I think just as a species, we need to have more grace for ourselves, because whatever we're experiencing now is probably one of the craziest things in the universe. If we're being honest with ourselves, right? We have no, uh, you know, evidence that there's life like us around. So this isn't happening to anyone else, to our knowledge. So, and they probably don't know what they're doing either.
Exactly.
So let's just be cool to each other, like, and I think that goes along with like the way that I see kind of parenting. As I think parenting needs to be a conversation between an adult and a child, and a shared experience. I think that's really what parenting
Oh,
is,
a
right?
shared
It's
experience. I
it's a
like that.
shared experience
Yeah.
of, right, your parents with your child.
Hmm.
That's all it needs to be, right? You don't need to, you know, be whatever dad you see on TV. You don't need to be Marcus Mariota's dad, right? You just need to be you and have a shared experience with your child and figure it out together. Because at the end of the day, like, that's probably the most fond memories you're gonna have is shared experiences. I think that's just basically across human nature, right? Is shared going through something with someone is like the ultimate, like, bonding, trust building thing you can do. And the craziest thing we do is just exist and go through life together. So
Well, and
just
then all
have.
the experiences you shared, all the lessons, they
Mm-hmm,
were experiences that you
mm-hmm.
went through with your mom, with your, grandparents, and that I think that is
Yeah.
so enlightening because you don't need to read, some of these. I've read so many parenting books and I've tried different things and nothing works. But I think, like you said, it's just more trusting themselves and knowing that
Mhm.
they're going to get through it.
Yeah. After the first couple of years, obviously, like, keeping your child alive, which I'm also totally terrified for. Um, right. It's after that, it's just, make sure they're fed, make sure they're safe, and then just share all these experiences with them. If you didn't do good in school as a parent, guess what? You get to share that experience with them again, right? They're gonna come ask you questions, and you're gonna be like, oh, I don't know any of this, but let's try to figure it out again. Like, you get another opportunity to, like, share that experience. It could go differently this time, right? You could be a little smarter than you were when you were growing
When
up,
I
and
love that perception though that it's okay because
yeah.
my daughter was taking like way higher math last year and I thought, you know what? She says, remember this, mom? I said, you know what? I don't, and I might have forgotten, but I can't help you. And part of me as an educator felt like I
Mm,
failed. Why didn't I know it? It's not as high of a math. I think it was just a 200 level course. I'm like, why? And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to release this. I don't need to know everything,
hmm Yeah, and
but
it's so much, like, easier that way for you
oh
and
my gosh,
your
it was the
child.
most stress-free thing. And then she ended up figuring it out. And I thought, wow. And I had to do
Mm,
absolutely nothing. I think
hmm
parents put too much like shoulds. I should
hmm
guide them. I should fix it. I should, So that's what I mean.
Yeah.
I love. Thank you for sharing that. I think every parent would benefit. I mean, reduce stress and then
hmm
also enabling their kids to figure it out. And then, when they leave, because that's what I think ultimately
hmm
every parent fears that when they're gone, they're not preparing their child, right,
hmm
for like real life. But that's what your mom taught you at such a young age
Yeah, and she
that
also
that you
had no idea what was going on at the time either. Is right is I watched her go through life struggling, not knowing what was going on, and I saw that, and I was like, oh, okay. that's
See,
how
but and you didn't
that's
fear.
how
I
it
think
is.
that's what. Yeah, I think that's what she taught you. I mean, it's like she took the fear out of the equation and she
Yeah,
just gave you
we
permission.
we moved so many times. We, moved from house to house, and sometimes it looked a little sketchy. Like, sometimes maybe we wouldn't have a place to stay, something like. But like, at the end of the day, like it all worked out. We were able to figure out how to eat 3 meals a day and figure it out, and um, just the ups and downs and all that kind of stuff, and just being able to learn that, yeah, like if you really just let go of like what led up to whatever moment you're in, right? You are able to rise up from wherever you are. And I think that understanding has helped me because, stuff gets crazy out here as an adult. Like
Yeah.
I know I'm turning 28 next week, but it's crazy out here. Like I understand now, like, yeah, just life gets crazy, and there's a lot of different people you're gonna meet and different circumstances and stuff like that. But really, like at the end of the day, it's like you're gonna figure it out. Every new situation, every new challenge, every new obstacle, um, it's gonna resolve. It has to resolve. It's like
It has
literally, I think
to.
it's like a
Yeah.
law of the universe. It's gonna resolve in a way that you don't want sometimes, but like being okay with that, I think, and just moving on is kind of like the greatest thing of all
Oh,
time
see, that's the
because
bottom line though, and to be okay with it, because that's the thing, right? Like, I am not okay with that F.
mhm,
I am not okay with whatever,
yeah. And then like the question I always like to ask is like, what does that do for you to hold on to that?
ooh.
Yeah. I did that to Belinda yesterday and she didn't like it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, because at first you think, but I need to hold on to it because it defines me or it's going
mhm.
to affect my future.
And
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 then,
that's the thing we're more afraid of, I think, is to admit
yes,
those things, right? And that's the thing that we go to therapy for, and that's the thing we get a life coach for, is to admit that like I want to hold on to that because it means this, this, and this to me.
yes,
And even though it costs you, you know,
peace and your
peace, your
sanity.
sanity, right? Like why, like if that's the cost to this and this, maybe this isn't really like worth the entry fee, right? We always do cost benefit analysis in our
Ooh.
head when we go to the mall, right? We'll go to
Yeah,
the mall, we'll
yeah,
look at something and be like, okay, it's 30% off, whatever. We do all that calculation, but we never do the calculation of how we hold on to things and what it costs. And I think for me, that's the thing that I always think about is like, what is the cost of like holding on to this, or what's the cost
that's
of,
what they should teach in class, right?
yeah,
Because I mean that would help people or help kids prepare for real life because they just hold on to it out of either habit or out of default or not even realizing
mhm.
that they should let it go.
Yeah, and yeah, I wish they would have a class like that because I think you had your counselors,
Yeah.
right, growing up, and they're trained a certain way, right, to help kids understand emotions and feelings and all this kind of stuff. But I think the more important thing is that like there needs to be a class taught just to give space for kids, right? I feel like,
Yes.
right, we always had like recess and like study hall and stuff like that, but I don't think that
Hmm.
really accurately gives kids the space that they need. I think there needs to be more spaces of like, hey, here's a time for you to just talk to your friends,
Yeah.
right? Is to go, right. I always hated that study hall was quiet. That irritated me more than anything because I get that I'm trying to study by myself, but like I know my friend over there knows the answer and like could
Right.
teach me this, but like also I don't know if anybody else in here is having trouble with this. Like
You have to be silent. I think, there
yeah.
are a lot of teachers who allow them now to,
Hmm.
to talk and to, because that's what it should be to help other people with, I think as long as they're not on devices. But yeah, you're right. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
and I
that's the old way of like study hall, be quiet, just like
Yeah, and
focus.
it's that same thing, right? We hold on to this idea of like, oh no, kids need to be able to figure it out for themselves, and like they will still, and also they get to practice asking for help, and also they get to
Yeah.
practice teaching other people and communication skills and all this kind of stuff. And I think the internet and technology can sometimes, right? It's a double-edged sword. It can
Yeah.
isolate you, right? And I think, right, there's all this stuff because at Kamehameha, we started getting laptops, I think around my freshman year. So we were like the first class they tested it out on. Right. And, there's a lot of efforts to like you can only see your screen and your own test and whatever. And there was not a lot of like ways to like interconnect the class, right? We all did that on our own through Facebook, right? Like that was the thing is
Right,
we
right, right.
became connected. And we gamed the system a little bit, right? We'd have study groups on Facebook and like people would, update, oh, this homework is due tomorrow, that kind of stuff, whatever, whatever. And I feel like that was more, there were more teachable moments in that and us doing that
Yeah.
together than the teachers trying to isolate us to gauge what we knew and stuff like that. Because I think in a classroom of kids, if there is like kind of like camaraderie
Mm-hmm.
and people picking each other up and helping each other, I think that's way more important of
Well,
an
it's team building,
environment.
right? Which will
Yeah.
transfer into the workplace and transfer into life.
Yeah. And that's how I coach most things is like, um, if one of the boys at practice comes to me and is like, I don't know how to do this, I'd be like, well, you know who's really good at that? Is this guy. You should go talk to that guy and see what he would say about that. And, you know, to me, that's what coaching really is. It's like
Mm-hmm.
giving giving them in the moments where they don't know the maximum capacity to like learn, right? It's like I could give you the answer, right? Just like with coaching, like life coaching, like I could give you an answer, but it doesn't mean much unless you're the one that initiates and figures it out and does it,
Well, it means
right?
much more, and then it's a just a more powerful impact,
Yeah,
right?
and
Instead
then
of
it's
like, here's
yours.
it is yours. It's not like
Yeah.
here's the answer key, and there's not one answer key that fits everyone.
Hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I know it's Melinda's birthday today, so please wish her a happy birthday from me, and thank you so much. I didn't realize, well, I took up a lot of your time, but I really appreciate it and wrote down a lot of notes. Thank you
No
so
worries. Yeah, I
much.
mean, I enjoyed the whole time, so appreciate having the time.
Thanks. Okay, take care. Enjoy the
Okay,
rest of
you
your
too.
day.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.